Am I really about to film another I Want to Talk About video on a year in gaming when the last one that I just filmed right now took me 50 minutes and it's 2 in the morning and I'm tired? Yes, I am. Welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I take a topic, I sit on camera, and I blabber about it. And like I said, next year in the series within a series, so today I want to talk about my favorite games of 2019. Again, you know how it goes at this point. I talk about the year in gaming, I talk about the big news, the console market, what it looked like. I talk about some notable snubbed games, some big ones that I didn't get to play in a given year or didn't play enough of. The just missed the cut games, which were games that would be like a personal 7 out of 10 on my scale. The cream before the crop of 8 and 9 out of 10 games, and then my proper best list of 10 out of 10 games. Again, I'm gonna go through the intro as quickly as I can to just get to the games, so let's just jump right in. 2019, a year I have quite a bit of nostalgia for, which I'm sure probably won't surprise many people because as someone who's already quite the nostalgic type, why wouldn't I have nostalgia for the year before a global pandemic flipped the collective universe's life upside down? And 2019 was an interesting year in the gaming world because at the time, it kind of felt like a slow year, but looking back, there were quite a few really good games, and I feel like this tends to happen with a lot of years in gaming. They feel slow until you look back in the future and go, actually, those games were really good. It might help that I was still working through my backlog at the time, so I didn't get to play some of these games in the moment, but nevertheless, a lot of great games from 2019. As far as the console market and what that looked like, neither the Xbox One nor the PlayStation 4 had as many gigantic banger-type exclusives in 2019. A few that were fairly polarizing, but nevertheless have their defenders, but it felt like 2019 was the obvious transitional year. Late in the year at the Game Awards, Xbox revealed its next console, while PlayStation had the first game for its next console revealed, and it had already been clear that the two would be ready to go in 2020, so there wasn't much in terms of gigantic games for either console in 2019. Now, the two of them did make some major acquisitions, of course. Xbox bought Double Fine while PlayStation bought Insomniac, but that was all we really truly got to see from them in 2019. One company this did prove fruitful for was Nintendo, as the Switch was really just getting started. Even though there was some sadder Nintendo news early in the year, like the Wii Shop channel closing and Reggie Fils-Aimé announcing his departure from the company, the Switch just kept on getting banger exclusive after banger exclusive in 2019. And if you're like me and you buy systems specifically for those first-party titles, 2019 was one of several years where Nintendo fans were eating real good. It's kind of funny to me, and it shows how much Nintendo's improved with the Switch, that a lineup like what they had in 2019 would probably have been seen as AA and not good enough in the Wii U era and would have barely moved the needle for that system. But by 2019, Nintendo was firing on so many cylinders that its overall lineup was seen as being pretty peak. And as someone who's arguably clung to Nintendo more than the other publishers, the Switch era has been an absolute joy for me. And no matter whether or not Nintendo lives up to it with the next platform, I'll always be thankful for the Switch. One of my all-time favorite gaming systems, for sure. Oh yeah, and the Switch Lite came out in 2019. Cute. The 3DS died this year anyway. Having a handheld-only system on the market was fine enough, and this one seemed to fill its purpose decently. As far as big third-party stuff, Bungie ran away at high speed from Activision and got to do Destiny 2 independently. 2019 was the year of Google Stadia, where Google, of all companies, was trying to get into the gaming scene with a cloud-based gaming platform. It worked about as well as it didn't. And in a little bit more of a sadder news that I'm going to bring up, because it's very much within the gaming community, specifically in the YouTube community, 2019 was the year of the passing of one of my favorite gaming content creators and favorite Nintendo content creators, Etika. It was a very big deal at the time. Obviously, there was a lot of very publicized stuff going on with him and his mental health, and it was really, really sad to find out that he took his own life at the time. But he was one of the best and one of the most fun Nintendo content creators to watch. And even at a time like 2015 or 16 when Nintendo was struggling with the Wii U, he basically made me remember many times over how fun it felt to be a Nintendo fan. He made being a Nintendo fan feel really fun. And that really showed in the Switch era. The Joy-Con boys really, really brought a lot of excitement back to Nintendo for me. So without a doubt, he was a huge content creator to me, and I felt like I needed to give him a tribute in this video specifically. It makes me sad that he didn't get to see some of the late era Switch games, but rest in peace to Etika, one of my favorite content creators to ever do it. So, at risk of an awkward transition, onto the games. And there were a few pretty big ones in 2019 that I didn't get to play. for one reason or another. There were 3 specifically. Looking at what we had Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. What is a helicopter doing flying over my house at 2 in the morning? I thought it would actually be quiet enough to film, but apparently there's a helicopter. Please go away, thank you. Anyway, yes, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. The game of the year of 2019. I'm sure this game is awesome, but again, I don't really play Souls-likes or From Software games, so I was never really going to get into this one. Disco Elysium, which I've heard a lot of amazing things about, but I honestly still don't fully know how it plays. And on the Nintendo front, probably one of the only exclusives they had that I didn't play, Fire Emblem Three Houses. Again, this was a huge game in terms of getting more mainstream attention and more eyes on Fire Emblem, but as someone who's not really into the franchise, I just kind of skipped over it. And in terms of the Just Missed the Cut games, we only have 2 here. The first of them being Team Sonic Racing, a reasonably fun little Mario Kart clone, especially if you enjoyed the Sonic All-Stars racing games. Though, to me, it was slightly invalidated by the fact that another kart racer centered around a platformer mascot came out like a week or so later. More on that in a bit. And Blood and Truth, which was an exhilarating action-packed VR shooter that, even if it's probably the VR game that made me queasiest and was a bit rough around the edges, was still plenty of fun. So now on to the cream before the crop, and again, we've got quite a few here, so let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right in. Wait, is this the first time that I'm talking about a roguelike of any kind in this series? I mean, unless you count the original Zelda game, it appears so. Now look, I'm not a huge roguelike player, but if it's a roguelite, send that thing my way. I'm down. I get addicted to roguelites pretty easily when they come my way. Now, admittedly, I didn't play this game until pretty late last year because I happened to notice that it was on Game Pass and one of my closest friends had talked it up a good bit, so I thought, why not? Especially because while I'm not the most frequent deck builder game player, I do have some experience with the genre thanks to Star Realms, and in classic deck builder fashion, I got hooked on it. Really, it was this game that helped popularize the deck builder in video game form, and rightfully so, because it's a really varied and thrilling experience with plenty of strategy to it as well. It's also one of those games that feels instantly replayable because of the sheer variety of the cards and the fact that different playable characters can build their own decks that have their own advantages and disadvantages. And in classic roguelike fashion, or roguelite, whichever you prefer, it nails that addicting feeling of, come on, just one more run, I can do it this time, I know I can do it. I'm glad this game ended up on my radar late last year because it's very fun. Be prepared to bash your head against the wall a little bit because it is a difficult game, and the fact that it's RNG based and the runs can take a long time can be overwhelming, but stick with it and you'll be rewarded with a great game. Can't wait to play that sequel, and I really gotta try out that Slay the Spire board game that just recently came out. Coming into 2019, this was perhaps my most anticipated game and the most anticipated game of many people, because a lot of us were super impressed that we actually lived to see it come out. So it was a joyous occasion when it was finally released. For everyone except me, because I was still trying to beat the rest of the series. In fact, when the game came out, I was still on Birth by Sleep. Dude, my Guitar Hero MLB and Smash obsessions made me miss out on a lot back in the day. Back off. But yes, Kingdom Hearts 3 was one of those games people thought would never come out, as after Kingdom Hearts 2's release in 2005, in Japan, Square Enix was content to just make a bunch of spin-offs, but they're not really spin-offs because they're canon to the overarching story, so you have to play them, but they're pretty different from KH2, so they're not main series, even though they are kind of games. I promise that sentence makes more sense than KH's story in a nutshell. Zippers. But this game wouldn't be formally announced until 2013, and obviously you can see in this video, it wouldn't be released until 2019. Hardcore Kingdom Hearts fans had to wait what felt like forever, but it finally dropped in 2019, and while it was pretty polarizing at the time of release, I personally quite liked it. Maybe it's because I make no effort to understand the Paopu fruit-induced drug trip that is KH's story, so I don't get upset about some parts of it. But gameplay-wise, it was pretty much everything I hoped for out of a PlayStation 4 Kingdom Hearts game. It's beautiful looking, the combat is refined a ton, the gummy ship sections are so much better than before, and I personally love the whole attraction flow thing where Sora can attack with theme park attractions. There's a lot of talk about how KH has become so much less Disney-focused, but stuff like that really helps appeal to the Disney fan in me. I said fan, not Disney adult. Don't look at me like that. I also love the new worlds, especially as a huge Pixar fanboy. I screamed in excitement seeing Pixar finally get represented in Kingdom Hearts through Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. One of these days I'll make some kind of video about Pixar. Yes, the gameplay does have its drawbacks. Some of the worlds are a little less interesting than others, and the weird difficulty imbalance of the bosses can be frustrating. But Kingdom Hearts 3 is still a game I really enjoy, and it's a game I do recommend. And if you try it out, it might honestly be a good spot to find some ingredients. And you know, it's been a few videos since I thought about it, maybe just from that wry smile, but It's been a little bit since I brought up MLB The Show. Oh, fuck. In my defense, this game became free on PlayStation Plus, so I decided to jump on it. After all, given that MLB 15 was my last The Show game before this one, come on, I wanted to play as a decent Phillies team. I know, they were 81 and 81 that year, but Bryce Harper was a Philly, damn it. If you told me when he came up as a hotshot phenom that he'd be a Philly, I'd have laughed in your face. But yeah, MLB The Show 19 might not have changed much from 2018, at least from what I've heard. But this is the fun part about taking a few years off between sports games. The years of pent-up changes make the entire experience feel new instead of just playing multiple games year by year and just noticing some incremental changes. 19 was the year when I noticed some of the big changes that MLB 17 made, like how Road to the Show had more choice-based story elements in comparison to the past, as well as having a classic mode that played a lot like old-school arcade-style baseball games of the past. It also included the March to October mode, which was a nicer, more truncated version of franchise mode, and the Moments mode where you got to recreate classic moments in baseball history, or even recent moments that happened across the course of a season. So yeah, 2019 felt like a much bigger deal because I had skipped multiple games in the franchise, and honestly, again, I recommend doing that when it comes to sports game franchises. All in all, again, no MLB game will ever really top the feelings that MLB 09 or 10 gave me back in the day, but it is always nice to dip my toes back in with this franchise here and there, especially now that the games are so readily accessible across multiple platforms and on subscription services like Xbox Game Pass and PS Plus. So kudos to MLB The Show in that regard, and kudos to them for actually getting rid of sets and seasons in next year's game. Thank God. Mortal Kombat X turned me into something of a Mortal Kombat fan, so you had to know that I was pumped when I heard a new one was coming at the Game Awards in 2018. And I did end up playing a fair amount of it, and even ended up beating the story mode recently. Fun fact, even though I enjoyed MKX so much back in the day, and still do, I didn't play the story mode of that game until several years later, so MK11 was actually the first Mortal Kombat game where I beat the story mode properly. And ultimately, I did really enjoy my time with this game, though definitely to a lesser degree than MKX. I think it helps that MK11's fighting mechanics were a bit slower and more defensive than what was in MKX, which always made it a bit tougher to adjust to for me personally. MKX just felt more fluid and fast-paced, where 11 didn't quite have that same speed to me. Nevertheless, I still had plenty of fun with it because the short story mode was still an action-packed thrill ride, the game was visually intense in the best of ways, and it had some awesome DLC characters to it as well. Of course, it's not a WB Games game if there's not some aggressively bad business practices tied to it with microtransactions and whatnot, and obviously that was annoying, but the game itself was still plenty of fun to play. Didn't quite hit like what MKX did, but still a very great game. Chances are, even if you're not a VR player, you know good and well about this one. And honestly, I don't have a proper 1 to 10 rating for it, but just know that it would at least be in this tier. Beat Saber, for those that don't know, is a VR rhythm game where you use 2 lightsabers to slash cube beats with arrows on them telling you which direction to slash them in. And of course, being a rhythm game, it's loaded with fancy lights and colors to make the experience even more wild. Think Guitar Hero or Dance Dance Revolution, but with lightsabers. So you could feel like a Jedi, but to the beat of a song. All things considered, it's not one of those games that necessarily changes the very foundation of VR gaming or makes you rethink just how innovative VR gaming could be. But beyond being a load of fun, this is probably one of the first VR games I can honestly recommend to gamers. It's probably the easiest VR game to play that won't lead you to getting really sick or dizzy or anything like that, since there's no moving camera or anything like that, and you pretty much play the whole game pretty stationary. The only moving you're really doing is avoiding hazards and stuff like that. I mean, yes, it's still a workout. You're moving your arms and stuff like that, but still, it's pretty easy to get into even if you don't have your land legs with VR games. Thus, again, I feel like this is probably one of the first VR games I can mostly recommend to someone who's just really getting into it. It's wildly fun, and especially given the amount of DLC available for it, there's plenty to enjoy about this game. If you're a first-timer looking for something fun and easygoing in VR that won't get you sick or anything like that, Beat Saber is definitely your go-to. Hey, remember the other kart racer I alluded to earlier when I was talking about Team Sonic Racing? Here you go. The late 2010s were a fun time to be a fan of the classic PS1 platformers like Crash and Spyro, because they both managed to make successful returns with the Insane Trilogy and the Reignited Trilogy, and suddenly, for a brief fleeting moment, it actually felt like Activision cared about Crash and Spyro again. It was fun to dream. But after Insane Trilogy and Reignited Trilogy, we were all hoping for one more thing. an entirely new game. But besides that, there were a lot of requests for Activision to remake Naughty Dog's other Crash Bandicoot game, Crash Team Racing. And why not? I mean, a CTR recreation of some kind was canceled in 2010 alongside that Crash Landed game, so why not start from the top? Now, I didn't talk about CTR earlier in the series because I didn't play it enough on PS1, but it was basically one of the PS1's better answers to Mario Kart that you were gonna find, so why not bring that back and have the whole Naughty Dog saga playable on current-gen platforms? And thankfully they did, though honestly, I couldn't have expected what they'd do with it as a whole. Because yes, this is a remake of CTR, but it's not just that. They added in content from Crash's other two racing games, Crash Nitro Kart and Crash Tag Team Racing. Talk about love. And the remake itself is fast-paced, beautifully designed, challenging, and an all-around blast to play. It definitely takes a bit to get used to the drifting mechanic. The controls can feel a little like, what am I doing? But once you do, the game becomes an absolute joyride. Now yes, the addition of microtransactions post-release is really annoying, especially after Activision flatly said no to microtransactions before its release, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's a shame that it soiled the game a bit because it's genuinely a great time. With that said, good luck playing it online. I've watched my brother play it online, and I swear it's nothing but cheaters on there, and I don't know how they do it. Believe it or not, this was actually the first Remedy Entertainment game that I played and, by proxy, beat. Yeah, I slept through Max Payne, and while I love me some Alan Wake, I wouldn't end up playing that until after this one. And actually, I dropped this game at first, believe it or not. I played it pretty close to launch, and beyond the fact that the story made this straight-edge human being feel like I was high enough to fly in space, the gameplay just felt a little too overwhelming to me. The sheer amount of enemies was just a little bit too much. But eventually, the Ultimate Edition came to PS Plus, and I found out that at some point, either during its release or beforehand, they added some accessibility settings, so I jumped on it. I know those kind of things are controversial among gamers, but look, I play video games for the experience of doing things I can't do in real life. So when a game adds things like a one-hit kill mode to make me feel like a god, why on earth would I say no to that? But yeah, the game itself is quite good. Definitely really mind-twisty, but it's plenty of fun and the combat is incredibly compelling. And again, if you play it like I did with the one-hit kill mode, you can feel like an absolute god. Oh yeah, and the ashtray maze, best level in the game. And one of the best levels I've played in any game. Honestly, what a level, dude. That shit was designed like so crazy. It was awesome. I'm glad I gave the game another chance because it's really, really good, and I'm definitely excited to see where Remedy goes from here with Control 2. Hopefully sooner rather than later. I promised in a previous video that we'd talk about something Annapurna has published, and here we are. Of course, I've got other stuff to talk about from them, but first, this. Sayonara Wild Hearts was one of those games I don't know how I got into. I can't remember if it was on PS Plus or my brother just bought it or what, but I gave it a chance and ended up really, really enjoying myself. It was quite a unique game. It's basically a game that plays out like a long music video where the main character rides through surreal environments on a motorcycle, destroying enemies to the tune of the music playing. And as Backloggd's description says, it's a game about being awesome. Because that's how every game should describe itself. Like I said, it's very unique though, and it really does feel like what would happen if you turned a pop album into a video game. It's a nice take on the rhythm genre with some great music, compelling enough gameplay, and a really kinetic art style. Almost to the point where I think it can be a bit overwhelming for some, but otherwise, it's a really cool game. It's incredibly short, so don't treat it as much more than a quick breather between beefier games, but it's a very compelling breather while it plays out. I love that I was talking so much earlier about Nintendo having a great 2019, and yet it took until now for me to bring up a Nintendo game in the video. Don't worry, we'll have plenty more from here. Now, I've mentioned a few times that I'm not as into 2D Zelda as I am 3D Zelda, and that's not out of disrespect or anything. It's probably just more of a generational thing, I suppose. But hey, even as someone who's more into the 3D stuff, Zelda is Zelda, so I'm naturally going to try a new Zelda game if it looks good. And The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening Remake was kind of interesting to me, because very long ago, my first Zelda game I ever owned was Link's Awakening DX on the Game Boy Color, but I didn't play it much because I was a kid, I barely knew what I was doing. But obviously, I was a very different person in 2019 than I was in the mid-2000s. One of those versions of me thought fart jokes were funny, and the other one was deathly scared of a feature presentation bumper on a VHS tape. Oh shit, both of those still describe me. Neurodivergent thing? But either way, I wanted to finally play this game and see how it went, and I really did enjoy my time with it. Link's Awakening's remake is bursting with love right from the jump with the visual style, which almost has this vibe like you're looking into a toy box and playing with some minifigures, and the gameplay lives up to that as well. Naturally, it's Zelda, so have a guide nearby, but the overall design of the game, the dungeons, the combat, it's all great. Plus, Koholint Island is awesome to explore, and there's plenty of interesting emotional moments to the writing as well. Whether you are a hardcore Zelda gamer or not, this is one of those games I can definitely easily recommend. It's great to see the love that went into this remake from its developer, Grezzo, I don't know how you say their name, I'm sorry. And it's awesome to see that they got to try their hand at a wholly new Zelda game recently with Echoes of Wisdom, which I unfortunately haven't played yet, so sorry, can't give my opinion on it. I know. Hardcore Super Monkey Ball fans are probably giving me dirty looks as I talk about this one. But honestly, I can't help it. I really like this game. This was actually my first... Shit, did I type that as Super Monkey Ball? Wow, Pokemon on the brain apparently. Anyway, this was the first Super Monkey Ball game that I'd ever played and beaten, though I actually played it first in its original form back in the day. Back during the early days of the Wii, even the days before its release, Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz was every GameStop in my area's favorite game to show off at the demo kiosks. Do stores still do demo kiosks? I feel like I never see them. Granted, I barely shop at GameStop anymore, so how the hell would I know? Either way, while I had a fun memory or two at these kiosks, Banana Blitz was not one of those games I had on the Wii back in the day. I only ended up getting the HD version because it was available for free for a weekend on Xbox. But honestly, I'm glad I ended up playing it because it was quite fun. Super Monkey Ball is always good for a run if you want a fun challenge, and Banana Blitz had a lot of levels that I had plenty of fun with, while also having some very smooth and precise controls to it as well. Sure, it was a game that made me want to rip my hair out more times than it didn't, but would it be a Super Monkey Ball game if that wasn't the case? Again, I understand this game isn't everyone's cup of tea, especially if you're a fan of the classic Monkey Ball games, but I personally had a lot of fun with it, and I do think it's worth a try if you're a first-timer to the Super Monkey Ball series. Though you're probably better served getting Banana Mania, or maybe that new game that came out this year. I haven't played it, but I heard it was pretty good. You don't know how much I freaked out when I first saw this at the Nintendo Direct in September or October 2018, whenever it was. I thought they were just showing more footage of that Luigi's Mansion 3DS remake that came out that year, but then it turned out no, 18 years after the first game, Luigi's Mansion was finally getting a new console entry. And given that Luigi's Mansion had become one of my favorite games of all time by that point, you know I was chomping at the bit to play this. And thankfully it pretty much gave me everything I could have wanted out of a new Luigi's Mansion game on a console. It's such a charming and clever, family-friendly horror game that isn't actually super scary, but it has plenty of personality and lightheartedness with the appropriate horror-themed atmosphere to boot. And while I still prefer Luigi's Mansion 1 as a whole as a game, I do think Luigi's Mansion 3 does a nice job polishing the ghost-catching gameplay of the original with new control options like the Dark Light, Suction Shot, and Burst powers. It's also much beefier than the first, so if you were turned off by how short the original game was, you'll have plenty to do this time around. It's a follow-up that definitely lives up to its already great predecessors, and as nice as it is to have gotten a new Luigi's Mansion game in 2019, it was even nicer seeing how good it was. Now honestly, I think Nintendo should reissue the first Luigi's Mansion game on the Switch, or I suppose the next console. That way the entire trilogy is available in one place. And lastly, in the cream before the crop, I know, even a non-Star Wars fan such as myself can give credit where it's due. I've said it numerous times before, I will play a licensed game even if it's based on a license I don't care about, so as long as the game looks good, I'm in. To that end, as soon as I heard that Respawn Entertainment was working on a Star Wars game, I was pumped because I just loved Titanfall 2 so much. And when I saw Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, I was genuinely really excited for it. And even though I'm not one that usually plays Souls-like games, this was one I really enjoyed. Compared to the typical Souls-like's slow and heavy wins the race combat style, Jedi Fallen Order actually feels a little bit lighter, which makes it more fun for someone like me who isn't too into the genre. It's exactly how a Jedi-based Star Wars game should play, and unlike many licensed games where I'm like, oh yeah, this is how it should play, but it's not that interesting to me, this one actually did play to my tastes. The level design is fleshed out very well, and the game offers a nice amount of challenge, even if you're like me and prefer to play on the lower difficulties. Yes, a Souls-like that offers difficulty options. Who'da thunk it? Given that EA had its share of struggles with the Star Wars license, it was nice to see them put out a game that actually felt really faithful to the IP, and it's a testament to how good Respawn is that they did so well with this, and eventually Jedi Survivor last year. Alright, so now I gotta get through the best list, which is 5 games, and my camera's on 1 bar of battery, so if I sound like I'm talking fast, my apologies. Either way, at number 5, to get it out of the way, because I love this series and this is one of my favorites in it, the Jackbox Party Pack 6. Yes, I'm aware it might be a major technicality to put a Jackbox game on the best list, but you know what? I'm doing it. Compared to Party Pack 5, which was great outside of one obvious lowlight in Zeeple Dome, all 5 games in this collection bang. Even Dictionarium, where you make up words and definitions, is probably the one that I've least played out of the bunch, but it's still plenty of fun and I've gotten quite a kick out of it. My friends always get a kick out of Role Models, which is like a personality test type game where you match each player to something that describes their personality, and the fish tank at the end became quite an inside joke between my friends and I. Joke Boat was always gold for, well, obvious reasons. It's a game where you make jokes. Trivia Murder Party 2 was a total classic. It was probably one of the ones we played the most, being that it's like a trivia gameplay-based game, but it has the feel of like a horror thriller a la Saw. And of course, how could I not mention Push the Button? It's only the most chaotic game in the pack, being a social deduction game akin to the Mafia and Werewolf type game, except on a spaceship with aliens. Between this and Among Us, and even the occasional game of Town of Salem, we created a lot of chaos during the COVID era. I miss playing these games with my friends.
He hasn't done anything suspicious. You've done something suspicious.
I haven't done anything suspicious!
No, do it, see what happens. Do it, see what fucking happens. I'm just hitting yes.
Do it, watch how wrong you are!
And yeah, Jackbox 6 is by far one of my favorites of the bunch, and I think its blend of games is among the best that Jackbox has ever put out, without question. At number 4, the franchise came back in a big way. I gotta go with Devil May Cry 5. It's been more than a few videos since I've talked about Devil May Cry, and thankfully we'll be talking about the game that brought the series back in full swing in 2019. It's funny because I remember this being announced at E3 2018 at Microsoft show, and even before having played the series, I thought it was an awesome announcement given that Dante was finally coming back. After all the DMC Devil May Cry controversy, it was nice to see this come along and actually bring what the fans had loved about the DMC series to the forefront. And I mean, it should be obvious given that it's the only game in this franchise to make one of my proper best lists, but Devil May Cry is my favorite in the series. Controversies aside, I had thought DMC Devil May Cry had the best gameplay in the series up to this point, but then DMC 5 came along and just swept that off its feet. It had the smoothest combat the series had come through with up to this point, what I think were some of the best boss fights in the franchise up to this point, and just an incredible sense of style to it that made it such a compelling return for the franchise after 6 years away. And it was also nice that even with having 3 separate characters to play as, all of them were very compelling and great to play with and felt extremely varied. Genuinely one of the best action games of its generation, and by far one of my own favorites, and another example of how good Capcom has been as of late. Now where's Devil May Cry 6? At number 3, moving back to the Nintendo front, I definitely gotta go with Super Mario Maker 2. I know I didn't really talk much about the first game in my 2015 video, but truth be told, I didn't really play it all that much. I'm not creative when it comes to making levels, so I didn't do too much of it, and the time I spent on it was mostly from playing other people's levels. Now Super Mario Maker 2, on the other hand, had me very excited. It sounds like a shallow reason, but when I heard it was gonna have a proper story mode, my interest was piqued. Like I said, I'm not good at creating levels, but I'll gladly play other levels if there's some motivation to do so. So I ended up playing the game, and boy, am I glad that I did. Nintendo, as I've said many times before, is the king of level design, so of course the story mode levels are fantastic, and even after completing the story mode, I had so much left to do. They really made the story very feature-packed, and it helped make Super Mario Maker 2 even more of a celebration of 2D Mario than its predecessor. And even if you're in it for the building, there are more than enough new tools and features to make building even deeper and more interesting this time around. And beyond the established gameplay styles they had of Mario 1, 3, World, and New Super Mario Bros. U, the addition of the 3D World style actually brings with it some great new features and power-ups that are well worth trying out. I myself nerded out about getting to drive a Koopa car, whereas Super Mario Maker felt just like a level editor turned into a full-price game. Super Mario Maker 2 felt like Nintendo making a much more fully featured game than before, and the result is one of my personal favorite games on the Switch. As great as Nintendo's output on the Switch has been in general, their generationally great Mario output really needs to be studied. But it wasn't quite my favorite Switch game of 2019. That belonged to my number 2 spot, Astral Chain. When I made my 2017 video, I thought it was a hot take when I put Nier Automata in the just missed the cut section, and that's a game I acknowledge I might be a bit unpopular on. I think I said in that video that I had played several other better games than it from Platinum Games, and to that point, I will bring one up now, Astral Chain. I feel like I could say this about most Platinum Games, but Astral Chain feels like a really underrated game to me. I know it sold 1 million copies and seemingly outperformed Platinum's sales expectations, but I feel like hardly anyone talks about it these days, and that makes me sad because it's a fantastic game. Writing-wise, it almost feels like an anime lovingly crafted into a video game with a great cast of characters and an absolutely breathtaking cyberpunk-based world. The visuals are lush, beautiful, and wondrous, and the gameplay absolutely shines big time here. The combat is deep and intricate, and the teamwork mechanic between you and the legions that you control is really awesome. And what's great about the legions is that unlike some games where a power-up or what have you is important for a mission but then forgotten about, it feels like each legion is important and necessary over the course of the game. Combine that with a campaign that's extremely varied in terms of mission structure and length with great boss fights, and you've got a game that pretty much ticks every box that it needs to. I'll say that Platinum Games making us wait 5 years for Bayonetta 3 was painful, but a game like Astral Chain made it that much easier to stomach. One of their best games, and one that I hope to see them return to at some point in the future. But it didn't quite hit the number 1 spot because we did have one game that was better. Some of you probably already know what it is, but this was a huge one in 2019. my favorite game of the year, my game of the year 2019, I gotta go with Resident Evil 2 Remake. What more can I say? This is pretty much my current favorite horror game of all time, and having completed another playthrough of it earlier this year, it's still an incredible achievement of a game. I still remember this being kind of an elusive thing for a while because it was announced and then not shown for a while, but then it was shown at E3 2018 at Sony's conference, and initially it kind of took me by surprise. Given that RE7 had just come out a year before, I wasn't expecting anything else out of Resident Evil so soon, but then I saw it and was like, oh, this is that Resident Evil 2 remake everyone's been waiting years for. And I wouldn't end up playing it until a few years later, but when I did, man, I was absorbed. It's kind of crazy just how much they upgraded this from the original game. It's one of those remakes that almost feels like an entirely new game. It also feels smooth as butter to play and control. It's always hard for me to play Resident Evil games that have tank controls, so not having them makes me very happy. And truly and honestly, this is the first game that I ever played that actually made me feel a genuine, like, oh shit, level of scared in a video game. Helps that I didn't really start playing horror games till recently, but you get what I mean. Like, it was genuinely, like, terrifying. Mr. X himself is crazy, and him appearing and lifting the helicopter up was the first time in a video game where, like, I felt my heart racing in sheer fear. I had played the first Resident Evil remake before this and appreciated what it was doing, but this was where I really came to love Resident Evil. Like I said, I replayed it earlier this year when it made it to Xbox Game Pass, and it's still just as awesome as I remember. By far my favorite in the series, and the kind of game I can recommend to anyone in a heartbeat. I know I don't need to say it again, but what an insane run that Capcom has been on as of late. This might, honestly, to me, be the culmination of all of it. Really a tremendous game. Definitely play it if you haven't already. Oh my god, I can't believe that I got through 2018 and 19 in one filming session. I have been filming for like about an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 45 minutes at this point. I am so tired. It's about 3 in the morning. But that's 2019. A year that, like I said, in the moment didn't feel as exciting for games, but looking back, there were a lot of bangers. And next video, we're going to be looking at 2020. I know that's a year that almost no one ever wants to look back on, but in the gaming world, that was the one thing that kept it going. Of course, this is all just my opinion on 2019 as a year in gaming. What were your favorite games of 2019? Was it something I talked about in this video, something I didn't talk about? What were the games that you had the most memories with, that you played the most? How pissed off are you that there's another helicopter flying over my house right now? Because I'm pretty pissed. And as for the question of the video that I like to ask, I talked a lot in this video about a couple of games that took a long time to come out. So, on your own level, what's the most torturous that a game's wait has felt for you? Like, what's a game you waited such a long time for that you felt would never come out? And when it did come out, did it deliver to your expectations? For me, I think it was probably like Super Smash Bros. Brawl. That thing took like 3 years to come out after it was announced, and at the time I was like not even 10 years old, so everything felt like it was longer. But what about you guys? What's the game that you waited for that felt the most torturous to wait for? Or is it something that's still not out? Are you still waiting for it? And if it did come out, did it deliver to your expectations? Whatever your thoughts, opinions, and experiences are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And like I said, 2020 is coming next. There's going to be a lot of games to talk about in that video. I do mean a lot. So yeah, I'm definitely going to take a break after filming 2 videos in this series back to back, both of which the raw footage is about 50 minutes on. So yeah, I've been up here in this room for a minute. I gotta go rest. It's like 3 in the morning. I am so dead tired right now, but hopefully I didn't seem too unenergetic in these videos. Hopefully the energy still managed to shine through. Either way, stay tuned for the 2020 video, but until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.